Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Rolling Hills Soul Care Podcast. My name's Jazzy. I'm here with Chuck Easterly. Hi, Chuck.
Hi, Jazzy.
How are you doing?
Very, very well.
Awesome. Now, are you really doing very, very well?
Well, that's the answer we always give, isn't it? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Tell people we're doing great?
Yeah, that's probably a podcast episode like 4 or 5 in the future, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll remember to get back to that. So today we're going to talk about your blog post 87 from, actually, I don't remember when you wrote these, but this one you entitled Sound of Silence, correct?
Correct.
All right. Do you mind reading that for us, Chuck?
I'll be happy to.
Thanks.
So here's what I said. 5:45 p.m. used to be a special time for me. Before the pandemic and before my retirement, most of our company's employees actually came into the office to work. Throughout the day, the sounds of people talking, phones ringing, elevator doors dinging as they opened, photocopiers and printers pushing out reams of paper, and even a steady stream of white noise filled the workplace with a constant hum. By 5 p.m., most of the people in the activity had decreased significantly. But it wasn't until 5:45 p.m. that I really noticed a big change. That's when the heating and air conditioning system shut off. Suddenly, there was a keen sense of silence. I could actually feel my body slowly relax. Moments before, I would not have told you that the noise was bothering me. But now that it was silent, I always stopped and exhaled a breath. Ah, this feels so nice. That's the kind of experience I think God is calling us into when He invites us to spend time with Him in solitude and silence. No music, no white noise, just time and quietness when we can take a deep breath, relax, and listen for God's voice. He's always talking to us, but His voice often gets drowned out by all the background noises. He wants us to hear His voice. He also wants us to be refreshed by this silent time with Him. He wants us to physically relax and be refreshed and restored as the HVAC systems, white noise, and office sounds in our mind suddenly go quiet. Ruth Haley Barton, in her book Invitation to Solitude and Silence, says, "In silence, we create space for God's activity rather than our own activity. To enter into solitude and silence is to take the spiritual life seriously, is to take seriously our need to quiet the noise of our lives, to cease the constant striving of human effort, to pull away from our absorption in human relationships for a time in order to give God our undivided attention." Ruth Haley Barton also provides some pretty straightforward advice, and she says, the most important thing about solitude and silence is, at some point, to stop talking about it and reading about it and thinking about it and just do it. And then she provides some practical steps to help us do that. The first one, she says, is to identify and set aside a sacred space and time. Explore all the possibilities for a time and physical space in which you can be alone on a regular basis. Preferably, you can identify a spot in your home, outdoors, or in your office that helps you settle into a quiet and receptive state of being. You may want to tell family members or roommates about your new commitment so they can honor the time by not interrupting you. 2. Begin with a modest goal. 10, 15, or 20 minutes of time in actual silence is realistic. You can always increase the time as your capacity for silence increases. The amount of time is not nearly as important as the regularity of the practice. Number 3, settle into a comfortable yet alert physical position. For example, sit in a comfortable straight-back chair with your back and shoulders straight, but also relaxed, both feet flat on the floor and your hands in a comfortable position on your lap. Number 4, ask God to give you a simple prayer that expresses your openness and desire for God. Choose a simple prayer phrase that expresses your desire or need for God in the simplest terms possible, preferably about 6 to 8 syllables, so you can pray this prayer within your normal breathing rhythms. Pray this prayer several times as an entry into silence and also as a way of dealing with distractions. Number 5, close your time in silence with a prayer of gratitude for God's presence with you. And number 6, Resist the urge to judge yourself or your experience in silence. The purpose of time spent in silence is to just be with God in whatever state you are in and to let Him be in control. Trust that whatever your time in silence was, it was exactly as it should be. And I close with Romans 15:13. I pray that the God who gives hope will fill you with much joy and peace while you trust in Him. Then your hope will overflow by the power of the Holy Spirit.
Oh, awesome, Chuck. Thank you. Um, okay, so we're sitting here in a podcast studio. No one can see us, but while you were going through those steps, I was following along with you. I mean, I didn't find a place completely by myself, and my feet, full
Thank you for not.
disclosure, did
Yeah,
not.
thanks for not leaving me. Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
that would have been a little too much solitude, and my feet didn't reach the floor because I'm a hobbit. But other than that, I was following what you were saying as you were saying it. Um, and what I noticed, what I observed is that the more at first I was still like finding my place, finding my position, and hearing everything that you were saying, of course. But the more that I concentrated on the specific actions that you were saying, not just as actions, but as the action of creating the silence, um, the more the silence became a participant in what my brain was doing. Um, and that made me think that, you know, if we were actually spending time doing this, that as the silence is filling, you know, hopefully God becomes the participant in that silence. Like the silence coming in is God being able to enter as well. And the first quote that you said from Ruth Haley Barton was, in silence, we create space for God's activity rather than our own activity, which is a very cool experience.
Well, and it's one that I will confess I'm not good at. Um,
You're
and
not
I
alone.
suspect many of us are not good at. I think we all have active minds, and I go quickly to my to-do list.
Hmm.
Um, Bill Town had a great suggestion, which I have used, and that's uh, one more thing that that she could have added and maybe does in her own practice is. But Bill has a piece of paper or a notebook near him,
Hmm.
so that when those things come into his head, rather than have to hang on to it, he just writes it down and can give it up again.
That's a
Um,
great idea.
and I have found that helpful because inevitably, uh, I am trying to spend time quiet, listening to God's voice, and instead it's my voice popping
Mm,
through with a "What about this?" and "What about that?" And sometimes I remember something that wasn't necessarily on my radar screen, but I'm trying to protect this time with God. And if I was with another person, like I'm sitting with you right
right,
here, if I had something jump into my head, I wouldn't just quit talking to
right.
you. Um, so when we're with God, trying to do the same thing, not where I'm sorry, God, I'll be right back.
Just a minute.
Um,
Got to
put
make
this
my,
down, come
yeah,
back, and then rededicate yourself. So I don't see it as a failure. It's a we're human.
of course.
So, and I do. I've found that having just some simple phrase of whatever that needs to be whatever works
Hmm.
for you. So I won't even tell you what mine is because it's unimportant.
Right.
It's that you can use that phrase to help refocus your
Hmm.
mind and as a discipline to try to stay there. You will easily pick up on things that were not apparent to you before. A
Sure.
clock ticking
Sure.
in the room is suddenly this, where did that come from? Background noise of cars, which may mean that you need to find a new spot to do your quiet time if that's a
Right.
distraction to you. There are no, there may be some perfect places, but it's not about finding the perfect place. It's about just finding a spot and taking the time to do it.
Yes.
And there isn't any one way. I gave you 6 things to think about.
Right, right,
I don't know Ruth Haley Barton, but I'm pretty sure she would say that's not a rule.
right.
These are suggestive ways that have worked for a lot of people. Put into practice what works for you
Mm-hmm.
to be able to get into a comfortable position. I remember I spent 30 years as a safety and health professional. And I remember one day I walked into an office and a gal was sitting in an office chair behind her computer she was sitting with her legs crossed, both, on the chair, no feet on the floor at all, legs crossed, I
I
was
don't know
like,
what you mean.
and I thought my safety hat came on and I said, I can help adjust your workstation so you don't have to sit like that. And she looked at me and said, I'm very comfortable like this. And that was a very good life lesson for me in terms of if she's comfortable in that
Mm-hmm.
position as a safety person, I don't need to fix that. She doesn't need to sit the way I want her to sit. And that's a lesson for us
Mm-hmm.
here is a straight back chair may be great for somebody. It may be awful for somebody else.
Right.
Taking a walk may be the way that you have your quiet time, depending on where you can walk. If you
Mm-hmm.
could get away from traffic noise and other things, but it's not what you do; it's how you do it.
It's not about making the perfect place for it. It's about creating the space
Right,
for it to come in.
and not allowing what I'm good at, making excuses for why I can't do it right now, or why it's hard, or I didn't do it well last time. So somehow my F grade on how did I do in this? I failed. So I don't want to get another F tomorrow. So the best way to not get an F is to not even do it. Well,
No F's in quiet time
no,
here.
no, there aren't. God is not greeting us. He just is looking for an opportunity to. He's speaking to us all the
Mm-hmm.
time. He's looking for an opportunity to have us hear him and to enjoy that. Like we've said before, it's that puppy dog at your feet,
Right, right.
looking up, attentive. God, what have you got for me today? And listening, and trying to get your voice and other voices out of your head.
And you said something also, it's not the passive action of God being heard. It's the active action of us listening and
Correct.
us hearing.
Correct.
I love that. Thanks, Chuck.
You're welcome.
Thanks for joining us today at the Rolling Hills Soul Care Podcast. And you can always subscribe to this to hear more episodes of the Soul Care Podcast. And you'll also hear Sunday gathering messages on that feed. You can always go to the RH blog and interact with other readers or listeners about this post. So that can be found at rollinghills.org/worship, or you can follow RH Worship on Instagram. You'll find all those links. And this was blog post number 87, Sound of Silence. Thanks for listening.